rain is Tess, the fire is June, they call the wind Mariah blows the stars around and sets the clouds a-flying. Mariah makes the mountains sound.
Flurry number 3. What we did in the 1970s. Today, it's hard to see and understand the complete absence of women in media, or almost the entire absence, from the movies and the TV that we saw in the 60s and the early 70s. By 1975, through the women's liberation movement, there were at least 67 women's media groups that sprung up all across the United States. This is pretty remarkable. They were in communities all over the place. There were also more groups similar to the US in other countries. Through these groups, we made films on many, many subjects. Women's history, rape, job opportunities, mothers and sisters, and most of all, health. In this time period, women organized women's film and video festivals to showcase the work that we were doing that wasn't getting on to mainstream media, so having independently run festivals became really critical. There, while we were viewing our own work and the work of our sister makers in this time period, we also started to learn and see the work of the many women who had gone before us. This was really astounding. So we were both being revolutionary in our own work because we knew nothing about the earlier work, and then seeing the earlier work. It was, got 1 foot in the past and 2 feet in the future. Much of these works, from Alice Guy Blaché to Ava DuVernay, are still seldom taught in cinema studies. In the time period also, it was really important to have a publication that digested this work, examined it, was critical, shared information about its making, et cetera, et cetera. There was a publication called Women in Film that sadly only lasted a few years. Another publication, Camera Obscura, much more academic, is still in publication today. The other remarkable thing was the technology was changing, and the video half-inch Portapak had come in to play in the late 60s. And this was a tool that was used by many women's media groups. And one of the projects that emerged during this time period was international video letters. Some 27 women's media groups from across the country participated in this exchange of news and cultural events and things like that were happening in women's communities, and shared that with each other. The project lasted for 2 years, from 1975 to 1977. So at its height, there were 350 community women newspapers that developed in communities across the country, published mostly monthly. They were in Boulder, Colorado, Connecticut, all over the country. Today, that we barely see women's media of newspapers on a regular kind of basis. There are a few, but they still remain somewhat obscure. And the problem with that is that women tend to report on what's going on for women, and the mainstream media does not. So the challenge is how to make those issues what does exist, more accessible, and force mainstream media to pick up on more stories. They certainly do today in a way that they did not in the 1970s, but it's still a problem. In this decade, women entered the US artist workforce at a rate four times greater than any other profession. This is an astounding statistic. And a good question is why? very few people have looked into exploring this data. Also, their entry into the artist workforce was at a rate 2.5 times greater than men in the same period. So the work that came out of all of these groups and this activity we did was fresh, exuberant, original, and dynamic. Have you seen it?